All right, welcome to the Libertarian Alternative. I'm Angela Keaton. Our producer is Mark Selzer. And if you'd like more information about any of the topics we talk about, you can always go to www.lp.org. Today we have longtime libertarian activist Ted Brown. We're going to be talking about the libertarian position on immigration, especially since we're here in Southern California. This has always had a great deal of... Let's go back to the beginning. What was Proposition 187, Ted?
That was the... okay. Prop 187 was a proposal to deny various government services to immigrants in California. It was back in 1994, I believe. And the goal was to say that immigrants would not be entitled to public education or public health care, etc. And basically it was an unconstitutional measure. I mean, the courts have already ruled that if the government's providing a service to one group of people, they can't discriminate against another group of people. So it was basically symbolic, and it was mostly backed by Republicans like Governor Pete Wilson at the time, and it pretty much lost the Republican Party pretty much any Hispanic support that it ever had. And that's been the case since then, pretty much.
Well, it brings up an interesting point for libertarianism. Since what is the libertarian position on entitlements?
Well, libertarians believe that we wouldn't single out illegal immigrants. We would say that these programs should not exist at all. I mean, some would say, someone who's here illegally should not receive taxpayer-funded health care. Well, libertarians would say nobody should receive taxpayer-funded health care or any of these other services. It's just a matter of, I agree that we shouldn't pick out one particular group and say, hey, not these guys, when it's taxpayers are on the hook to everybody else. So libertarians say the program is the key, not what these people are doing on their immigration status.
But with the entitlements removed, then what do libertarians say about who can be here and under what circumstances?
Well, the libertarian platform pretty much says that has an open border policy, that whoever wants to come here should be able to come here. But of course, without the entitlements, it would mean that they wouldn't be able to sign up for unemployment or other government benefits. So they better be here to work and earn their keep, and just like anybody else.
Well, what was the upshot of 187? What happened? What was passed?
Well, it did pass, but then the courts, as expected, ruled it to be unconstitutional.
So, in California, as applied to California, given that the libertarians have this position of A, no entitlements for anyone, and B, we should have an open border, how now do you describe, given those principles, the proper position for this day?
Well, it's become a really controversial issue, obviously. I mean, in past years, libertarians were considered crazy for our position on the drug war, but that seems to be coming into vogue as like on medical marijuana and other issues where we're not crazy anymore, calling for the end of drug prohibition. But now people are thinking, oh, that libertarian position on immigration is where libertarians are crazy. How can they say that? How can just anyone be let into the country? And I think there might be some ways to deal with security concerns, but on the economic side of it, I don't think that there are that many concerns. I think they're saying there are concerns. They're worried about like American jobs, but really the immigrants are fulfilling a need that might not be fulfilled otherwise on the economic side, especially in California and some of the other border states where we're talking about agricultural issues. I mean, you might be able to find people, Americans, to of course do construction work or whatever, but it's extremely difficult to find anybody to do farm work. They've open applications for these kind of things, and nobody wants it.
Well, I want to actually talk about what some of the opposition say. Last year, I got to the pleasure of meeting Jim Gilchrist, and he brought up several arguments, and I guess you could say that he might have some points. The issue of language. What do you think that's an honest concern? Do you think that the issue of people not speaking English is a real concern?
Well, it's happened. Immigrants have been coming to this country for hundreds of years, and usually the people that come first don't speak English. And they may or may not learn English, but their kids sure do. And then after that, every subsequent generation speaks English. I mean, my grandparents didn't speak English, or great-grandparents, or the people that came over. They came once from Germany. They spoke German, and their kids did fine.
Well, actually, we do have hard numbers on that. A recent magazine last year actually did an issue on immigration, and they actually have the hard numbers that it's actually by the third generation, most Mexican Americans don't speak any Spanish, or at least not Spanish that would be good enough for Telemundo.
Right. I believe it because they go to school here. Everywhere they go, they're going to talk to people in English, or be asked to be spoken to in English, and pretty soon the immersion will be the way to learn.
Well, actually, the consequentialist arguments. I mean, I'm a moralist libertarian, but the consequentialist arguments are strongly in favor of open borders. Mostly the people in the Gilchrist camp don't actually have the hard arguments. What are they really afraid of?
Well, I think they truly believe the economic concern, like, oh, all these American jobs are being taken away by the immigrants, and that's not the case. Then they also say that our tax dollars are being used overly so for, like, health care for immigrants, public education for immigrants, but these programs are so over budget already. That is a concern, but not enough to keep the people out. In fact, it depends on the level of government we're talking about. For example, the immigrants may be paying into the federal government, such as for Social Security and Medicare and those kind of taxes, and not being able to claim them. So there's probably a net positive on the federal government.
It absolutely is a net
Right,
positive, and
right.
also,
But the state and local governments are the ones that aren't getting that net positive.
actually, the white man has something to learn here from the Mexican. Actually, Hispanic businessmen are starting more new businesses percentage-wise
they?
than whites. Yes, and that to me seems that it's good. That's good for American business.
Well, sure. Anyone's starting a business, because the entrepreneurial spirit is important. I can see why they wouldn't be able to do that in Mexico, perhaps, because there'd probably be like government officials breathing down their neck for bribes, and they'd be harassed and all. Here it's more legal harassment.
Legal harassment,
extra legal harassment in those countries. But now the other thing, though, that the non-economic issues involved, and I think for the Minutemen and the very anti-immigrant groups, are concerned, and somewhat legitimately, about security issues, about who is coming into this country. And they say if the border is so porous, people are anybody just wander in here. Is it going to be some criminal or terrorist or someone like that? And that is a legitimate concern these days. The thing is, though, even if we know everybody that's here, whether they're a tourist who came in on a passport or someone just snuck across the border, you don't know what they're going to do. I mean, there's no way to tell, unless they already have a criminal record, that they could be up to no good.
Other than Salma Hayek, though, is there one single Arab that's ever come across the Mexican border?
There's no way of knowing. Maybe the Canadian border.
Perhaps, but I think, but I'm not as up on the Canadians as I am on the Mexicans.
But they could. But the thing is, there could be more of that if need be. But it seemed like, for example, the 9/11 hijackers came in legally, whether it was students or tourist visas or whatever. So we knew they were here. It didn't make any difference.
No, it didn't.
But they could now, if there's more controls in that regard. And I don't know if there are or not. I haven't tried to come in here from a Middle Eastern country, but they could try that to come in through Mexico, because if they can get into Mexico, which they might have trouble getting into Mexico in the first place, then they can.
But if we didn't have a bunch of people hanging out on the border trying shooting people, if we just had normal checkpoints, bus stations, and ordinary Mexican workers being able to come in freely, okay, it would be a lot harder for someone who's trying to harm us to come in, because then it's normalized. Instead of this, this closed door is hurting us.
It is.
It's actually making it more dangerous in the long run.
Right. What you mentioned about workers just wanting to come into work, that's actually a very important issue, because in the past, when it was not as much enforcement, people would just more easily go back and forth. Someone would come here to work for the growing season or just work for a few months and then go back to their village in Mexico to be with their family. Now, if they get here, it's such a monumental occasion that they've arrived in this country. They say, well, I can't keep going back and forth. I've got to bring my family over here to stay permanently, even if I didn't really want to do that in the first place. So then they bring the whole family over, and the whole family is here. It should be easier just to commute back and forth pretty much across the border for working. The people with the recent immigration reform were assuming that everybody's coming here with the goal of becoming a U.S. citizen, and I don't think that's the case at all.
No, people were just coming to make a buck. In fact, with the touchback provisions, you're encouraging people to stay here much longer than they realistically would.
Yes, exactly.
Some of the arguments, though, that the Minutemen make are cultural. So then what is it? Is it the brown skin that's bothering people? I mean, is that, and I don't like to impute racism to my opponent's motives, but I have to wonder, if people are merely offended by seeing a Mexican flag being waved, so the hell what? I've got bigger things to worry about. If that's what's offending you the most,
It seems like what's offending them